Layaway wasn't invented to help poor people buy things. It was invented to help poor people buy things poor people weren't supposed to have. For most of the 20th century, layaway was understood as a moral good. A working family put down a deposit on a winter coat, paid in weekly installments, and walked out with merchandise they'd fully owned before taking it home. No interest, no debt, no creditor. The narrative was simple. Layaway democratized consumption. It let ordinary people participate in the commercial world on their own terms. This story is mostly true, it's also incomplete. Layaway emerged in the United States around the 1930s during the Great Depression. Retailers faced a crisis. People had no money, but they still needed things. Department stores, Woolworths, Crestges, local 5 and dimes discovered that offering a payment plan kept customers coming back. The customer held nothing. The store held the merchandise. Payment happened in small, manageable chunks. When the final dollar was paid, the transaction completed. This wasn't credit. That distinction matters. Credit meant a bank or finance company extended trust and charged interest for that risk. Layaway required no trust and no interest because no money was lent. The customer paid first, ownership transferred last. It was, in structure, the oldest form of commerce, barter and payment before delivery. The post-World War Roman II era transformed this picture. Veterans returned home. Wages rose, suburban housing boomed. Consumer credit, credit cards, car loans, installment plans backed by finance companies became normalized and aggressive. By the 1950s, the cultural shame around debt began to dissolve. Layaway suddenly seemed quaint. But layaway didn't disappear. It persisted, especially in discount retailers and among lower-income shoppers. And here's where the story begins to crack. Layaway was no longer positioned as an alternative to credit. It was positioned as something else, a safety mechanism for people the credit system had already rejected. By the 1980s and 1990s, major retailers Kmart, Walmart, Target had formalized layaway into a scheduled service with explicit terms. You made a down payment, usually 10 to 50% of the item's price. You paid the remainder over a fixed period, typically 60 to 120 days. The store held the item in a back room. If you completed payment, you took it home. If you didn't, the store kept your deposits and resold the merchandise. This is where the mechanism inverted. The original layaway was a tool of customer power. I'll pay you gradually and you hold my goods. The modern layaway was a tool of retail power. You give us money now, we hold your goods, and if life intervenes, a job loss, an emergency, illness, we keep what you've already paid. The data bears this out. Studies from the 2000s onward documented abandonment rates. Customers failed to complete layaway purchases at rates between 15 and 30%. In a single holiday season, a major retailer could forfeit hundreds of thousands of dollars in customer deposits. The store's response was predictable. They kept the money, no refunds, no exceptions. The merchandise was restocked and sold at full price to someone else. Why would layaway persist if it was so profitable for retailers? Because it worked. Customers used layaway precisely because they had no other options. Credit cards carried interest. Personal loans required credit checks they'd fail. Payday lenders charged rates that bordered on usury. Layaway asked for no credit score, no background check, no income verification. It asked only for patience and discipline. But layaway also created a strange trap. The longer the payment period, the more likely circumstances would change. A car broke down, a child got sick, hours got cut, the deadline passed, the deposit stayed with the store, and the customer faced a choice: abandon the purchase and lose what they'd already paid, or find emergency credit, a payday loan, a credit card to complete the layaway and recover their sunk cost. This is the real mechanism. Layaway wasn't a debt trap in name. It charged no interest, required no credit approval, but it functioned as a debt trap in practice. It extracted money from people with the least margin for error, held it in escrow, and then weaponized the sunk cost fallacy against them. Lose the deposit or take on actual debt to recover it. Those were the options. The 2008 financial crisis accelerated the decline of layaway. Retailers, desperate for immediate cash, began phasing it out. It required them to hold inventory without payment. It required customer service overhead. It generated no interest income. By 2010, many major chains had discontinued the service entirely. Walmart, Target, Kmart, gone. But the demand for layaway never disappeared. It just moved. Smaller retailers, discount chains, and online sellers kept offering it, and a new generation of fintech companies saw the gap in the market. They built buy now, pay later platforms, Affirm, Klarna, Afterpay, that marketed themselves as alternatives to credit cards. No interest, no credit check, pay in installments. Sound familiar? The terminology changed, but the structure didn't. These platforms charged retailers, not customers, a 2 to 8% processing fee per transaction. The customer saw no interest, but they did see late fees. They did see payment deadlines. They did see algorithmic pressure to buy more faster, knowing payment could be deferred. The trap had simply been modernized. What layaway reveals is this: the mechanism of financial exclusion doesn't always wear the face of debt. Sometimes it wears the face of convenience. Sometimes it appears as a gift, a way to buy what you couldn't otherwise afford, and sometimes that's even true. But the real question isn't whether layaway or buy now, pay later help people. It's whom they helped more, the customer or the merchant. The answer historically is clear. Layaway extracted deposits from people with the fewest financial reserves. It held that money interest-free, generating float and psychological pressure. It forfeited deposits at scale when circumstances changed, and when it faded, it was replaced by a system that did the same thing with different vocabulary. The mechanism persists because it works not for the customer but for the system. Understanding Layaway's history matters because it's still happening. The tools change, the terms shift, the platforms evolve, but the underlying logic, extract payment from those with the least buffer, hold it, monetize the pressure, remains constant. Knowing how this worked in the past is the only way to recognize it when it appears in new forms. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Subscribe to see how these consumer mechanics evolved. There's a new financial mechanism to decode every week. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.